Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air in the Port Charles Metro Court pool house was thick with the cloying scent of chlorine and blooming night-blooming jasmine, a sweet, almost suffocating aroma that did little to mask the tension simmering between the two men. Drew Kane stood with his arms crossed, his posture rigid, a stark contrast to the casual, almost predatory ease with which Sonny Corinthos leaned against the polished teak bar, pouring 2 fingers of amber whiskey into a crystal tumbler. "You want one?" Sonny offered, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that had charmed and intimidated in equal measure for decades. "No," Drew's reply was clipped, final. He'd been rehearsing this moment in his head for weeks, playing out every possible permutation of the conversation. He had compiled files, cross-referenced transactions, and connected dots that formed a picture so damning it felt like a physical weight in his briefcase. The leather case sat on a wicker table between them, an unspoken threat. Sonny took a slow sip, his dark eyes appraising Drew over the rim of the glass. "You've been avoiding my calls, Drew. I'm starting to take it personal." "This isn't personal, Sonny," Drew said, though the statement was a lie so profound it tasted like ash in his mouth. "It was entirely personal. It was about the families torn apart by the poison Sonny peddled. It was about the legacy of violence that stained the city like a persistent shadow. It was about Carly, and the constant, gnawing worry in her eyes. It was about Michael, who had tried so hard to break free from this very darkness. And it was about the memory of Jason Morgan, the brother he never truly knew, a man whose life and death were irrevocably tied to the man standing before him." "Everything in this town is personal," Sonny countered, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. "You think this is about business? This," he gestured vaguely between them, "is about respect. It's about loyalty. You came to me. You asked for a seat at the table. I gave it to you. And now you're standing in my pool house, looking at me like I'm the villain in a story you're writing." Drew felt a muscle twitch in his jaw. "I asked for a chance to help legitimize your operations. To take the shipping and distribution networks you built and use them for something clean. Something legal. You agreed, but you never had any intention of changing. You just saw it as a new coat of paint on the same rotten foundation." Sonny's smile vanished, replaced by a flat, dangerous calm. "Be careful, Drew. You're treading on ground you don't understand. My business, it's complicated. It provides for this city. It keeps a certain order. You dismantle what I've built, and you won't like what rises from the ashes. Chaos doesn't discriminate. It'll swallow you and everyone you care about, too." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. It was the same tactic Sonny had always used, a blend of paternal concern and ruthless menace. For years, it had worked. People fell in line, convinced that Sonny's brand of controlled corruption was preferable to the alternative. But Drew was no longer one of those people. He had seen the cost up close, and he was done calculating it in favors and whispered warnings. "I'm not here to negotiate, Sonny," Drew said, his voice dropping, losing its edge and becoming chillingly steady. "I'm here to give you a courtesy. A head start." He reached for the briefcase, the click of the latches unnaturally loud in the tense silence. He withdrew a thick manila folder, its contents bulging against the paper seal. He didn't hand it to Sonny, instead, he placed it on the bar next to the whiskey bottle. "What is this?" Sonny asked, not touching it. "That is a summary. A condensed version of the evidence I've handed over to the district attorney's office. The full submission includes bank records from shell corporations in the Cayman Islands and Cyprus, wire transfers directly linking you to the shipment of illegal arms to known terrorist organizations, witness testimony from 3 of your former lieutenants who are now in protective custody, and a detailed forensic accounting of how you've been laundering money through several local businesses, including 2 you partially own with my sister." Sonny didn't move, but a profound stillness settled over him. The air seemed to grow colder. The affable host was gone, replaced entirely by the hardened crime lord. His eyes, once warm with a feigned camaraderie, were now black pits of cold fury. You turned on your own, Sonny whispered, the words laced with a venom that could kill. You wore a wire? You sat in my home, broke bread with my family, and you were gathering evidence? I did what I had to do to stop the cycle, Drew replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. You confuse family with a criminal enterprise, Sonny. You use love and loyalty as a shield for your crimes. I care about Carly. I care about Donna and Avery. But my loyalty to them doesn't mean I can stand by and watch you destroy lives. Your operation isn't about providing for a family, it's about feeding an empire built on blood. Sonny's hand shot out, not towards Drew, but to the folder. He ripped it open, his eyes scanning the top document. It was a transcript of a recorded conversation, one where Sonny had explicitly ordered the elimination of a rival, his voice clear and cold. He saw the bank routing numbers, the dates, the amounts. He saw the names of the men who had turned, men he had trusted with his life. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask of rage. You have no idea what you've done, Sonny said, his voice trembling with a barely controlled storm. You think this ends with me in a cell? This ends with bodies in the street. This ends with a war that will burn Port Charles to the ground. My organization, it's a delicate ecosystem. You just threw a grenade into the center of it. Then it's an ecosystem that deserves to burn, Drew said, his resolve hardening with every word. I'm not afraid of the fallout, Sonny. Because for the first time, I'll be on the right side of it. The warrants are being signed as we speak. I suggest you call your lawyer. Drew turned and walked out of the pool house, leaving Sonny standing amidst the opulent trappings of his life, the damning folder splayed open before him. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The die was cast. The news broke like a thunderclap over Port Charles. By the next morning, it was the lead story on every local news channel and the front page of the Port Charles Herald. Kane delivers Corinthos to the DA, screamed the headline. The city was thrown into a state of shock and frantic speculation. At the Quartermaine mansion, the atmosphere was divided. Tracy Quartermaine poured herself a stiff drink at 10 in the morning, declaring it was about time someone had the guts to clip that man's wings, while Monica, ever the matriarch, fretted about the collateral damage, her heart aching for the innocent members of Sonny's family. Ned, caught between his corporate ethics and his complicated history with Sonny, simply looked grim, understanding the economic and social earthquake that was coming. Across town, at Carly's penthouse, the world was collapsing. She had thrown a vase at the television, the glass shattering and scattering across the expensive rug. Her phone was ringing incessantly, reporters, friends, enemies. She ignored them all, her mind reeling. Drew. It was Drew. The man she had trusted, the man she had let into her life, her business, her confidence. He had used that access to destroy the father of her children. The betrayal was a physical pain, a knife twisting in her gut. Jocelyn found her mother sitting on the floor, tears of rage and despair streaming down her face. The subsequent confrontation between mother and daughter was explosive, with Jocelyn, who had always seen a more nuanced picture of her father, screaming that maybe Drew was right, that maybe this was the only way to make him stop, before storming out, leaving Carly alone in her shattered world. The legal machinery, once set in motion by Drew's meticulous evidence, ground forward with uncharacteristic speed and efficiency. Sonny was arrested in a dramatic, very public spectacle outside of his warehouse office. He didn't resist, his face a stony mask for the cameras, but his eyes promised a retribution that would be biblical in scale. His bail was set at an astronomical figure, one even he couldn't immediately meet, and he was remanded to the Port Charles holding facility, awaiting his arraignment. The initial court appearances were a media circus. Drew was subpoenaed to testify, and sitting in that sterile witness box, looking out at the crowded courtroom, he felt the full weight of his actions. He saw Carly in the front row, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. He saw Michael, his expression conflicted, a tumult of anger, relief, and grief. And he saw Sonny, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place in the drab courtroom, his gaze fixed on Drew, not with rage, but with a chilling, calculated calm. It was the look of a man who was already planning his next move, from inside a cage or out. Drew's testimony was calm, methodical, and devastating. He walked the jury through the complex web of Sonny's operations with a clarity that was born of deep understanding. He wasn't an outsider looking in, he had been on the inside, and his testimony had the ring of undeniable truth. He explained the coded language, the structure of the money laundering, the violent enforcement that underpinned every seemingly legitimate deal. The defense attorney, a high-priced shark from New York, did his best to tear Drew down, painting him as a jealous rival, a man who coveted Sonny's business, his power, and even his wife. He tried to evoke Jason Morgan, suggesting Drew was trying to destroy his brother's legacy out of some twisted sense of posthumous rivalry. But Drew held firm. "This isn't about Jason," he stated, his voice clear and firm. "And it's not about jealousy. It's about accountability. For too long, Sonny Corinthos has operated above the law, using his charisma and his checkbook to buy silence and complicity. I was complicit. I looked the other way because it was easier. But I will not do that anymore. The people of this city deserve to be safe from the drugs, the guns, and the violence that his organization profits from." The trial stretched on for weeks, each day revealing new depths of Sonny's criminal empire. Witnesses, protected and cloaked in anonymity, testified to the brutality. Financial experts laid bare the global scale of his money laundering. The mountain of evidence was simply too high to climb. Throughout it all, Drew became a pariah in certain circles. He was confronted at Kelly's by a furious Sean, Sonny's longtime bodyguard, who accused him of betraying a man who had always protected the city in his own way. He received threats, both veiled and explicit. His car was vandalized. Scout's school had to increase security. The cost of his principles was being tallied daily, and the bill was steep. He spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if Sonny was right, if he had merely unleashed a different, more chaotic kind of hell. The final day of the trial arrived. The jury had deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but in reality, was only 3 days. The courtroom was packed, the air so thick with anticipation it was hard to breathe. Drew sat in the back, away from the glare of the cameras. He watched as Sonny was led in, his hands cuffed in front of him. For the first time, Drew saw something other than defiance or cold calculation in his eyes. He saw a flicker of something else, the realization that the walls were finally closing in. The judge asked the foreperson if the jury had reached a verdict. "We have, Your Honor." A piece of paper was passed to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. The judge read it, his face impassive, and handed it back. The silence in the room was absolute. "On the count of racketeering, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Carly let out a choked sob, burying her face in her hands. "On the count of conspiracy to distribute illegal narcotics, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." "On the count of money laundering, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." Count after count, the word guilty echoed through the wood-paneled room, each one a hammer blow driving the final nail into the coffin of Sonny Corinthos' freedom. When it was over, Sonny stood for sentencing. His lawyer made a final, impassioned plea for leniency, speaking of his client's contributions to the city, his mental health struggles, his role as a father and a pillar of the community. The judge was unmoved. He looked down at Sonny, his expression severe. "Sonny Corinthos, for decades you have operated a criminal enterprise that has brought violence, fear, and corruption to this city. You have shown a blatant and persistent disregard for the law and for the well-being of your fellow citizens. You have been given chances and have squandered them all. The time for mercy is over." He sentenced Sonny to 25 years to life in a federal maximum security prison, with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 20 years. It was a life sentence. For a man of Sonny's age, it was the end. As the marshals moved to lead him away, Sonny turned one last time. His eyes scanned the courtroom, past his weeping family, past his shell-shocked allies, and found Drew in the back. There were no more words, no more threats. There was only a long, cold, final look, a promise that even from behind bars, the war was not over. Then he was gone, ushered through a side door, out of the world he had ruled for so long. The aftermath was immediate and profound. On the surface, Port Charles breathed a sigh of relief. Editorials praised a new era of law and order. The police department celebrated a victory they had been unable to achieve on their own. There was a palpable sense that a great, dark shadow had been lifted from the city. But beneath the surface, the underworld, that delicate ecosystem Sonny had spoken of, began to convulse. Without its central, controlling figure, the organization fractured. A bloody and chaotic power struggle erupted almost overnight. Rival factions, once kept in check by the fear of Sonny's retribution, now saw an opportunity. The streets, for a brief moment quieter, soon became more dangerous than ever as a dozen new, hungrier predators fought over the territory he had left behind. Sonny's prediction of a war was proving terrifyingly accurate. For Drew, the victory was hollow. He had wanted justice, and he had gotten it. But justice, he was learning, was not a clean, surgical thing. It was messy and bloody, and its consequences rippled outward, touching lives in ways he never could have predicted. He had lost friends. He had alienated family. The trust of people he cared for was shattered, perhaps beyond repair. He would walk through the streets of Port Charles and feel the eyes on him, some filled with gratitude, but many more with accusation. He had set out to destroy a monster, and in doing so, he had unleashed a hydra. He had wanted to free the city from Sonny's grip, but all he had done was exchange a single, known devil for a legion of unknown ones. He stood at the window of his apartment, looking out at the city skyline, the lights of the city twinkling like a field of fallen stars. He had won. He had exposed Sonny's crimes and caused his imprisonment. He had done the right thing. So why did it feel so much like a defeat? The battle was over, but as he looked out at the teeming, complicated city, he knew the war for the soul of Port Charles had only just begun. And he was now, irrevocably, at its center. The silence in his apartment was deafening, broken only by the distant wail of a siren, a sound that was no longer just background noise, but a constant reminder of the chaos he had authored. He had traded a king for anarchy, and the weight of that choice would be his to carry for the rest of his life. Drew Kane had spent years trying to build a peaceful life for himself after the chaos that defined his earlier days. He had been through war zones, mind control experiments, and countless battles for identity, and in the end, all he wanted was stability for his daughter Scout and a chance to live without constant danger. Yet, in Port Charles, peace was always fleeting. The more he tried to avoid conflict, the more it seemed to find him. And this time, the conflict was tied to one of the most powerful and dangerous men in town, Sonny Corinthos. Drew had admired Sonny in the past, sometimes even respected his ability to protect his family, but he couldn't ignore the darker truths. Too many lives had been shattered because of Sonny's decisions, his criminal empire, and his unrelenting need for control. For a long time, people looked the other way, excusing Sonny's crimes as part of doing business. But Drew had reached a breaking point. What he discovered about Sonny's most recent activities wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal in the most undeniable way. And Drew knew if he didn't take a stand now, Sonny would continue destroying lives without consequence. It all began when Drew stumbled across a shipment log while helping a friend look into suspicious financial records at Aurora Media. What seemed at first like an accounting irregularity soon unraveled into something much darker. The trail led him to a shell company, one Sonny had quietly set up under someone else's name. On paper, it looked legitimate, but Drew had seen enough to know how front businesses worked. The deeper he dug, the more alarming the connections became. It wasn't just about moving money, it was about moving contraband, possibly even weapons, into Port Charles through Sonny's territory. Drew hadn't wanted to believe it at first. He thought perhaps it was a mistake or that someone was setting Sonny up. But the evidence didn't lie. Sonny had crossed a line even his closest allies might not forgive, and the fallout would be devastating. Drew wrestled with the decision for days, pacing his home, replaying the memories of the times Sonny had shown loyalty or kindness. He thought about Carly, who still loved Sonny in her complicated way, and he thought about Nina, whose marriage to Sonny was already crumbling under the weight of secrets. He thought about Michael, Sonny's son, who had struggled for years to reconcile love for his father with the damage his choices caused. And Drew thought about Scout, wondering what kind of example he was setting if he chose silence over truth. In the end, Drew realized that loyalty to Sonny was misplaced. True loyalty was to the people of Port Charles who deserved safety, to the families who had already lost too much, and to the next generation who shouldn't grow up believing men like Sonny were untouchable. With a heavy heart, Drew gathered the files, the bank records, and the proof of Sonny's hidden dealings. He made a choice that would not only change Sonny's life forever but would also put his own relationships at risk. He was going to expose Sonny, no matter the cost. The confrontation came faster than Drew anticipated. Word had spread that someone was digging into Sonny's finances, and before long, Sonny himself showed up at Drew's doorstep. The mob boss carried his usual calm menace, the kind that made people tremble even without him raising his voice. Sonny asked Drew directly what he was doing and why he was sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Drew, who had faced down enemies far more unpredictable than Sonny, stood his ground. He told Sonny he knew the truth and that covering it up wasn't an option. For a moment, Sonny looked almost wounded, as though Drew's betrayal cut deeper than any police raid ever could. But that vulnerability quickly gave way to fury. He warned Drew to think carefully before making a move that couldn't be undone. Drew, however, had already thought it through. He knew there was no turning back. He handed the evidence over to the authorities the next morning, sealing Sonny's fate. The fallout was immediate and explosive. The police launched an official investigation, and the walls of Sonny's empire began to close in. Jason was gone, Carly was torn in 1,000 directions, and Nina had no idea how to defend her husband against charges that were backed by mountains of evidence. Michael was devastated, torn between wanting to protect his father and finally seeing justice served. Christina and Dante struggled with the same inner conflict, both realizing that loving Sonny didn't erase the crimes he committed. And as the media picked up the story, the entire town of Port Charles was buzzing with shock. For years, Sonny had been the untouchable figure, the one who always managed to outsmart the law. Now, thanks to Drew, Sonny was facing prison time with no easy way out. When Sonny was arrested, the scene was nothing short of surreal. The police came to the Corinthos compound in broad daylight, refusing to allow another chance for him to slip through the cracks. Sonny tried to maintain his composure, but the weight of handcuffs around his wrists told a story louder than any denial he could offer. People gathered, whispering as the mighty mob boss was led away. Carly's eyes filled with tears as she watched the man she had loved for so long being taken from his home. Nina collapsed into a chair, unable to process the destruction of her marriage. And Drew, standing in the distance, felt a mixture of guilt, relief, and sorrow. He hadn't wanted it to come to this, but he knew it was the only way. Sonny's reign of power had finally come to an end, and Drew was the one who brought it all crashing down. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over Port Charles, but the air was thick with tension. Drew Quartermain stood in the dimly lit office of his campaign headquarters, staring out the window at the city he had sworn to protect. His jaw was set, his eyes narrowed with determination. For months, he had been piecing together a puzzle that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the community he loved. At the center of it all was Sonny Corinthos, the charismatic yet dangerous mob boss who had long evaded justice. Tonight, that would change. Drew had the evidence he needed, and he was ready to bring Sonny down. The office was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of papers as Drew's assistant, Lila, sorted through files. She glanced at him, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. "You're sure about this, Drew?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Going after Sonny, it's not just risky. It's dangerous." Drew turned to face her, his blue eyes steely with resolve. "I've never been more sure of anything, Lila. Sonny's been running this town for too long, hiding behind his charm and his connections. People have suffered because of him, families torn apart, lives destroyed. If I don't stop him now, who will?" Lila nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she handed him a thick manila envelope. "This is everything you asked for. Financial records, wiretaps, witness statements, it's all there. But, Drew, you know what he's capable of. If he finds out you're behind this..." "He won't," Drew interrupted, taking the envelope. "Not until it's too late." Across town, in the penthouse that served as both his home and his fortress, Sonny Corinthos poured himself a glass of bourbon. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, his mind racing. He had built an empire in Port Charles, one that balanced legitimate business with the shadowy dealings that kept his power intact. But lately, he'd felt the walls closing in. Whispers of betrayal, rumors of investigations, it was nothing new, but this time, something felt different. His instincts, honed by years in the underworld, told him trouble was coming. His right-hand man, Jason Morgan, stood by the window, his arms crossed. "You heard about Drew's latest campaign speech?" Jason asked, his tone clipped. "He's doubling down on cleaning up Port Charles. Didn't mention you by name, but we both know who he's targeting." Sonny's lips curled into a wry smile. Drew Quartermain. Always the hero, always the martyr. He thinks he can take me down with a few sound bites and a clean suit. He's got no idea what he's walking into. Jason's expression remained unreadable. "He's not just talking, Sonny. He's digging. My sources say he's been meeting with federal agents. If he's got something solid." "He doesn't," Sonny snapped, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Nobody's got anything on me. Not Drew, not the feds, nobody." But deep down, Sonny wasn't so sure. Drew had been relentless, a thorn in his side ever since he'd returned to Port Charles with a renewed sense of purpose. The man was a Quartermain through and through, stubborn, resourceful, and dangerously principled. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. Meanwhile, at the Quartermain mansion, Carly Corinthos paced the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. She had just gotten off a heated call with her mother, Bobby, who had warned her about the rumors swirling around Sonny. Carly's loyalty to her husband was unwavering, but even she couldn't ignore the storm brewing. She hung up and turned to Jocelyn, her daughter, who was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Mom, what's going on?" Jocelyn asked, looking up. "You've been on edge all day." Carly forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just business stuff." Jocelyn wasn't convinced. "This is about Sonny, isn't it? I heard Drew's speech on the news. He's going after him, Mom. What if he's right? What if Sonny's—" "Don't," Carly cut her off, her voice sharp. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Sonny's your stepfather, Joss. He's done everything to protect this family." Jocelyn stood, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Protect us? Or protect himself? I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. I know what Sonny does. And I know Drew's not the type to make accusations without proof." Carly's heart sank. She wanted to argue, to defend Sonny, but a part of her, a small, nagging part, wondered if Jocelyn was right. Drew wasn't one to act recklessly. If he was coming for Sonny, he had something concrete. And that scared her more than she cared to admit. Back at campaign headquarters, Drew sat at his desk, the manila envelope open before him. The documents inside were a damning chronicle of Sonny's crimes, money laundering, racketeering, smuggling, and worse. Witness statements from former associates painted a picture of a man who ruled Port Charles with an iron fist, manipulating everyone from dock workers to city officials. A USB drive contained audio recordings of Sonny discussing payoffs and deals, his voice unmistakable. Drew had spent months working with a trusted contact at the FBI, building a case that was airtight. Tonight, he would hand it all over. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. A text from Sam McCall, his ex-wife and one of the few people he trusted implicitly. "Be careful, Drew. Sonny's people are watching." Drew's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but before he could respond, the door to his office burst open. Monica Quartermain, his mother, stood there, her face pale. "Drew, we need to talk. Now." He stood, alarmed by her urgency. "What's wrong?" Monica closed the door behind her and lowered her voice. "I just got a call from a friend at the courthouse. They're saying there's a warrant out for Sonny's arrest. Your name's all over it, Drew. People are talking. If Sonny finds out you're the one who turned him in, he'll know soon enough," Drew said, his voice steady. I'm meeting with the feds tonight. They're ready to move. Monica's eyes widened. Tonight? Drew, you can't. You know what he's capable of. If you do this, you're painting a target on your back. Drew crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder. Mom, I've made up my mind. Sonny's hurt too many people for too long. I can't stand by and let him keep doing it. Not when I have the power to stop him. Monica's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Just promise me you'll be careful. I will, he said, though they both knew the promise was hollow. Going up against Sonny Corinthos was like stepping into a lion's den. There was no guarantee of coming out alive. As night fell, the streets of Port Charles buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread that something big was about to happen, though no one knew exactly what. At the Metro Court, Olivia Falconeri overheard whispers among the staff about a federal raid. At Kelly's diner, customers speculated about Sonny's empire finally crumbling. And at the police station, Commissioner Jordan Ashford fielded calls from anxious informants, all sensing the same thing: change was coming. Drew arrived at the FBI field office under the cover of darkness, the manila envelope tucked securely under his arm. Agent Torres, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for getting results, greeted him with a curt nod. "You've got everything?" she asked.